it's clear in my head, but it really doesn't matter if it's clear in my head. It's got to be clear in your heads and your dad's. So the best thing now is, I know it's about lunchtime. Let's go back and get some lunch, and I'll spend about 45 minutes to an hour and draw up and give you more of a visual on the tablet so that we can actually discuss it. There's the drawing. Makes sense? I can go now.
Yeah.
See you guys later. So I wanted to explain this a little bit. You know, we talked about a lot of this, how it fits together. Obviously, green is food plot.
Yep.
And here's a long one. We had the two lobes. That's where the oaks were. I think you can take a little bit more food plot in there once you take this field over. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see a lot of switchgrass on this side. It's more your access side. You have hunting stands up here. And you're gonna have a little bit of access off to the side, but I'd like to see, you know, in here it could be 10 feet of switchgrass. Over here you might have 30, 40 feet of switchgrass. And I think that matches up to where you already have the smaller food plot planted. If you're planting that upper portion in switchgrass, and you're gonna be able to do so easily with frost seeding. The brown areas, explain these big shaded areas right now. You know, yellow switchgrass, these big shaded areas, those are those areas where I'd really like you to focus a higher percentage of select cut. So especially clear cutting your aspen and hitting your timber a little bit harder so that you have more like 50-60% canopy exposed instead of 20 or 30. You'd still cut in these areas surrounding the cabin. Cabin right there, and this is that inside bowl where you don't want to hold as many deer in there, but you still want the cover and the habitat to be a higher value than it is right now. So you don't. And then with this being just a very select cut in these areas out here are a lot harder. And then you still want the deer, like right now it's all, let's say it's all a 1 or a 2 out of 10 for bedding. In the future you want to see it more, this is a 7 or 8 out of 10 for bedding. Maybe try to diversify that with conifers, 50 to 100 trees per acre. You tuck those back in the tops and debris. But you want that to be more like a 7 or 8 out of 10, maybe a 9 or 10 out of 10 if you get the conifers going and get a little bit more diversity. Where these areas in here might be a 4 or 5. So you're increasing the value of the bedding area and the holding capacity of the land, but you're still maintaining a drastic difference between one side where you're cutting more, where you want the deer to be, where you're not accessing through, where you want to hold them, and then the cabin side, which is this big bowl where you're trying, not to say that deer won't ever use that, but you want to give them a little bit more cover so if they're above the cabin right here or above your drive coming in, that there's enough cover, they're not looking right down on top of you when you're coming in. It's not just open timber all the way to the top. So for that, adding a little additional cover will keep you from spooking deer as much. And the yellow areas of switchgrass, those are so critical. Like I talked about, like in these areas, I want to pull doe and fawn bedding from these upper benches around here. And I want to stick those right down into these locations right here. So really, that doe bedding takes place largely in these areas right here. So you're taking doe bedding that was up top, you're moving it down more, and then that frees up buck bedding for right here, in these locations right here. On this side, you want those does to bed up close to the food plot as close as possible, and you'll give them the opportunity to do so. I love this upper rim right here where there's a lot of aspen. So you cut it, you clear cut aspen, that's the type of timber harvest that you would have on a pocket like that, or you're gonna get 7,000 shoots per acre on that, and that's all stem count, side cover, regeneration, food. And so what you're doing is right now there's a little bit of browse in there, but a lot of mature timber. And then a lot of the food is more towards either the middle right here or out on the ag. So really it's more random movements. You can't really say that the deer are feeding here, feeding there, and then they have that adjacent high quality browse. They have to have browse. They feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. So they have to have that browse twice during their bedding hours. Let's say that was early morning and noon time, you know, depending. And then you want them to have that high quality food source for the third feeding of the day. And then your land is really well positioned so they can just funnel right out and hit the ag field after dark. So you're looking at a really tight window that you're trying to maximize those first 3 feedings of the day, the 2 with browse, which you can increase with the timber harvest, and then that 3rd with the food plot. So it's kind of like, which is more important, the browse or the food plot? You have to have both. The red lines, those are where I'd like to see you carve out deer trails to connect the dots. And I like to focus on existing deer trails as much as possible. One of the greatest implements you can use for that is a DR brush trimmer or that type where it's 28 to 30 inches wide.
Yeah.
You have one?
Yep, we got a walk behind.
Yeah, those are nice. For one, because they're walk behind, but 2, they cut about that perfect path for deer. In an area where you don't have to worry about erosion control, I like using a herbicide. So if you have a backpack sprayer, you can clean that trail, and deer are very visual, so to see that dirt trail going right through the bedding areas and connecting to the water holes and the areas you want them to move, then it is just perfect. But you can hinge cut occasionally to one side or just face cut, drop a tree on either side. So you're trying to create a deer trail that would move along like this. Deer trail's moving this way, and then you're dropping trees either side just to further define the deer movement. Also, each stand location, I'd add about 1 mock scrape for every stand location. You're not adding 50 along this trail, you're adding 3. And that way the value of 1 is very high. I believe that you can get away with, we talked earlier how many water holes can you get away with, but on 130 acres where you have top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, and then you have different elevation changes. This is 250 yards long, it's a little bit lower than this. Then you have a lot of locations where this water hole can support a completely different water hole or movement than this water hole, let alone one that's all the way down and across the valley here, or all the way up on top, or all the way down and across and back up top over here. Completely different movements. So that's a good thing, because water holes are hard to beat during the rut. And when you combine them with mock scrapes at every stand location, I like placing my cameras at those locations too, my trail cameras. And that way you can really put an emphasis on that movement right at that stand location on that travel corridor. So I like the way everything lays out, and of course you can use your imagination. I have 11 stands there. I think your land could have 15 to 20 when it comes to that. What I also like about this is you're creating first, which we talked about in the beginning, you're creating these hidden food sources. So that complements the bedding areas that you can create around those, and where those bedding areas and where those deer can be hidden, the movement that flows throughout the entire land. And then once you have the food in the adjacent bedding, then you can create your access and stand locations. So that being said, those are the 3 founding principles on your land that we can improve. But you guys have a lot of hunters here during gun season. So when you actually maximize the efficiency of your acreage, and you create these pods of movement where you have food and bedding in these areas, then it's a lot easier for gun season to stick someone over here, someone down low, someone up high, someone down low. So each person has their own spot to sit, but completely different from everyone else, and you can use multiple access routes to get there. I think it'll help you out a lot with gun season, let alone give you a huge amount of options during the bow season, during the rut. And then for that, I just left the sign and the trail cameras tell me where to hunt.
Cool. Well, this looks great, Jeff. Really appreciate you coming out here today.
Yeah.
Taking
it's a fun day with you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Great to go through with you and kind of get a different set of eyes on things. So
yeah.
Really appreciate it. All right, Jeff. So we got the blue sky long-term plan. What would you say are our biggest hit list things for the next, say, 3 months, 4 months leading up into the season that we can still impact for this year?
Everything we're doing is matching the lay of the land and the way the deer are moving anyways. So really concentrate on those access routes to stand locations, the stand locations themselves, the mock scrapes at each one of the stand locations, and then you can get those water holes in too.
Yeah.
One of my favorite notifications is a text with deer you shot or really cool trail cam photo, your dad shoots a buck. You know, I love getting those, so please send them. That's one of my favorite things during the hunting season is to get those pictures. So
Sounds good. Well,
yeah,
Hopefully we'll have something to send.
yeah, thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
I'll
Jeff.
see you later.